At 2:13 a.m., my wife said my name the way people do when something is already wrong. I came out of bed barefoot and stepped straight into cold water. It had run down the hallway from the nursery and darkened the hardwood. Maya was standing in the doorway in one of my t-shirts, one hand under her stomach, the other holding a mixing bowl under a steady drip coming through the ceiling over the crib. We hadn't even finished assembling yet. Outside, the wind was slapping a blue tarp hard enough to make the whole back half of the house sound loose. 2 days earlier, our roofing contractor had stripped the rear slope, stacked bundles in the driveway, promised his crew would be back first thing Thursday, and then stopped answering calls. Thursday passed, Friday passed. Now it was early Saturday morning. The first real October storm had arrived, and rain was finding every place his tarp crew had failed to seal. I put 2 more buckets down, moved the changing table away from the wall, and climbed into the attic with a flashlight. Wet insulation sagged between the trusses. One sheet of OSB near the valley was so soaked it flexed when I touched it. I just crouched there staring at it, doing the math I should have done before I handed a man $30,000 because he said he needed to lock in materials. Maya looked up at me when I climbed back down. "Tell me you got him." Straight to voicemail. She nodded once, tight and furious. Maya was 5 months pregnant and had been more patient than I deserved through all of this. She was the one who asked twice whether anyone should really get that much money before the first nail went in. I had said yes because his contract looked polished, and our rainy season was close enough that delay felt more dangerous than trust. Then my phone buzzed. It was finally him, Brent Calloway. No apology, no, I'm on the way. No question about damage, just one text. Weather delays happen. We will resume when conditions allow. I read it twice while water kept dripping into a stainless steel bowl behind me. That was the moment it really clicked for me. The leak was bad enough, but that text told me exactly who I was dealing with. I stopped thinking of him as my contractor right there. We hired Brent because a guy 3 streets over said, "He's fast, not cheap, but he actually shows up." Looking back, that should have been warning enough. Our roof wasn't collapsing, but it was old enough to make me nervous. 2 leaks the previous winter, 1 soft patch near the rear valley. With the baby coming in February, Maya wanted it done before the weather turned. We got 3 bids. Brent's was not the lowest. It was the smoothest. $42,000 total, full tear-off, new flashing, and a 7-day schedule if we signed before month end. He pushed urgency without ever sounding pushy. "Supplier pricing jumps next week. I can hold a crew for you if you commit today. If I start after the first storms, you're gambling with the decking." Then he put a finger on the payment schedule and said the part I still hear in my sleep. 30 up front gets all the material on site and keeps your spot. I knew better. I signed anyway. His crew worked exactly 2 days. Day 1, they dropped a dumpster, tore off the back slope, and left exposed decking under a plastic sheet, weighted with 3 bricks. Day 2, they ripped out the old valley metal, peeled back flashing around the nursery vent stack, and stacked bundles in the driveway like the job was rolling. Brent walked me around the site at 5:40 p.m., slapped a glove against a tarp edge, and said, "You're dried in. Even if it rains, you're fine." After the payment cleared, the excuses started rotating. Wednesday, one of his guys had a family emergency. Thursday, supplier delay on the ridge vent. Friday morning, we're finishing another roof that got held up by inspection. Friday afternoon, nothing. Saturday at 2:13 a.m., water was coming through the nursery ceiling. At 7:06 that morning, I pulled up the city's permit portal and searched our address, then his company name, then the parcel number. Nothing. No roofing permit. No open application. No scheduled inspection. I checked the contract again. His license number was under his signature. So was a bond number, his insurer, and a line saying all work would comply with local permitting requirements. I called him once more, not because I expected honesty, but because I wanted the voicemail timestamp. Then I opened a folder on my desktop called Calloway File and started reading the job paperwork like I wasn't the homeowner he thought he trapped. I still hold an active general contractor license. These days I manage commercial renovation work, but I spent enough years in the field to know when a roof job is being handled by an idiot. By 7:30 that morning, I had every exterior wall photographed, every tarp edge documented, and every wet area inside the house measured with a moisture meter from my garage. Rear nursery ceiling, 28%, attic decking at the valley, saturated, vent flashing at the pipe boot, removed and not replaced. One tarp edge had been stapled straight through the field instead of lapped and sealed. It was a garbage temporary patch, and it was always going to fail. Maya followed me from room to room, writing times on blue painter's tape, buckets on the nursery floor, wet insulation in attic, water line above window trim, drip reaching crib location. She labeled everything in block letters while I climbed ladders and swore under my breath. Then I did what Brent clearly had not imagined I could do. I logged into the state license board portal and pulled his license record, bond carrier, and complaint instructions in under 5 minutes. Active license, yes. Bond on file, yes. Prior disciplinary action, too. One settlement from 3 years earlier for abandoning a kitchen remodel after taking an excessive deposit. At 8:12, I called an emergency mitigation company I knew, and had them send a crew with proper shrink wrap and temporary waterproofing. At 8:19, I requested an urgent inspection through the city because unpermitted roofing work combined with active water intrusion gets attention when you use the right words. At 8:31, I emailed Brent formal notice that further damage was occurring, that I was documenting all conditions, and that he needed to provide permit information and a weatherproofing plan immediately. He still didn't call back. At 8:47, I hit submit on the inspection request and attached 6 photos, including one of water dripping into the room where our son was supposed to sleep. I knew by then I wasn't trying to save the project anymore. I was putting together the package that would screw him. Luis Herrera from the city showed up at 10:06 a.m. in a gray rain jacket, looking like he'd seen this exact scam 100 times already. He spent maybe 4 minutes outside before asking, "He left it like this overnight?" 2 nights, I said. Luis looked up at the rear slope, where the tarp had peeled back enough to expose raw decking at the valley. Water was still tracking down the fascia. He took 6 photos, climbed into the attic with me, and stood in the nursery long enough to see the next drip fall into the bowl Maya had swapped out for a stock pot. His language was careful because inspectors know every word they write may be read by lawyers later. Even so, the message was clear: unpermitted work, inadequate temporary weather protection, active interior water intrusion. He told me that another licensed contractor should stabilize the structure immediately to prevent further damage. That sentence was gold. At 10:41, I sent Brent the inspection notice, 3 photos, and a short demand. Provide permit information, arrive on site by noon with crew and proper weatherproofing materials, or I would mitigate independently and pursue every available remedy. He called at 10:49 already shouting, "You had no right to bring the city out there. You had no permit. That doesn't matter on a job this size." It absolutely did, and he knew it. Then he shifted tactics. Suddenly, I was the problem. I was panicking over normal exposure. I was making this worse by calling inspectors. He said if I brought in another crew, he could file a mechanic's lien for breach and tie the house up for months. I let him talk. Then I asked one question. "Do you want to text me your permit number now, or should I note that you refused?" Silence. Not long, just enough. He hung up on me instead of answering. I went back to the contract, looked at the bond number under his signature, and for the first time since the leak started, I felt calm. Because threats only work on people who don't know the process. There is a big difference between a homeowner complaint and a board file. Homeowner complaints sound like this: "He lied, he vanished, he ruined my house." All true usually, but emotional. Easy to shrug off as anger. A board file is just evidence stacked in the right order. By noon, I had my dining table covered in piles. Signed contract. Wire confirmation for the $30,000 draw. Screenshots of every missed call and every text. Luis's inspection report. Weather screenshots showing less than a quarter inch of rain the day Brent claimed conditions made work impossible, followed by the overnight storm he left us exposed for. Time-stamped photos of the torn valley, missing flashing, soaked insulation, water on the nursery floor, and the mitigation crew shrink-wrapping the open slope the way Brent should have done before he ever drove off the site. Maya made coffee and started reading timestamps back to me while I built the chronology. Tuesday, 5:42 p.m. as he says you're dried in. Thursday, 8:11 a.m. supplier issue. Friday, 1:16 p.m. no response. Saturday, 2:13 a.m. leak starts. Somewhere in the middle of that list, it stopped feeling like our bad contractor story. It was just a case file now. At 2:04 p.m., I filed the complaint with the state licensing board. At 2:17, I transmitted the bond claim to a surety with the contract, inspection report, payment proof, and a demand for immediate acknowledgement. At 2:26, I opened the recovery fund notice packet. Not because that money comes fast, it doesn't, but because deadlines matter and people lose valid claims by being embarrassed for too long. Brent sent one more text at 3:11. "You're blowing this up for no reason. My crew will get there Monday." Monday was exactly what he wanted. 2 more days for the weather, 2 more days for damage, 2 more days for me to pay somebody else and get tired of chasing him. I replied once, "Do not return to the property without proof of permit, proof of insurance, and a written weatherproofing plan. Your bond carrier has been notified." He did not answer. 48 hours later, I was standing in the driveway staring at the temporary wrap on my house when my phone rang from an unknown number. It wasn't Brent. It was his surety. The woman from the surety introduced herself, gave me a claim number, and asked if I could walk through the job from contract signing to present condition without editorial language. That told me Brent was in trouble. I walked her through it in order. Contract signed September 18th, $30,000 collected September 19th. Tear-off started September 24th. Exposure left incomplete September 25th. No permit on file. No adequate weatherproofing. Active intrusion recorded September 27th at 2:13 a.m. City inspection same day. Mitigation initiated that morning. She asked me to send the updated photo set, mitigation invoice, and square count for the rear slope. I sent them before we hung up. Brent called 90 minutes later, sounding like a different man than he had on Saturday. Less swagger, more hurry. Why would you go to my bond before letting me fix it? You had 2 days to fix it. You changed the scope on me. Your wife wanted the skylights reframed. Then you brought inspectors out there and scared my crew off. That was new. So was the claim that we had refused access, even though I had camera footage of nobody arriving after Wednesday. By Tuesday afternoon, his story had grown again. Now the delay was because I had panicked over normal weather exposure. By Wednesday, he was saying the city inspector was biased, and I was trying to set him up because I didn't want to pay the second draw. I answered every new lie the same way. Documents, inspection report attached, text log attached, camera still of his trailer leaving at 4:58 p.m. Wednesday attached, permit search result attached, no speeches, no threats, just records. Maya listened to one of his voicemails on speaker while folding tiny baby clothes her sister had sent us. Brent was halfway through saying I was making this worse by calling people who don't understand roofing when she looked up and said, "He still thinks you're the mark." And she was right. The surety investigator called again Thursday morning after reviewing the updated file. His tone was flat. He just needed one last number. "Can you confirm," he asked, "that he collected more than the value of the work actually completed?" I could confirm it down to the dollar. I broke the work out the same way any competent estimator would. Tear off on one slope, partial disposal, some material drop, no completed dry-in, no new flashing system, no installed shingles, no permit, no inspection, no weatherproofing that met even a relaxed standard. Generous valuation using his own contract rates where possible. $8,940. That was being kind. He had $30,000. Within a week, the licensing board acknowledged the complaint, requested his response, and copied me on a notice listing potential violations that looked like a checklist of everything he'd done wrong. Excessive advance payment, abandonment, unpermitted work, failure to protect property from damage, and possible misrepresentation. The lien threat died right there. Brent still tried. His lawyer sent a letter full of soft language and hard nonsense, saying there had been communication breakdowns, and that my hiring another roofer might prejudice Brent's right to cure. I forwarded Luis's report, the active leak photos, and the mitigation invoice, showing we acted only after documented water intrusion. My lawyer added one line I appreciated very much. Your client forfeited any right to cure when he abandoned an unpermitted roof opening during forecast rain. That pretty much killed the act. A new roofing company came out 2 days later. They didn't give me a speech. They gave me a 12-page scope, permit number by lunch, and 6 men on site the next morning. They tore out the soaked decking Brent had left behind, replaced 2 rafters at the valley where moisture had started to stain the lumber, and had the house properly dried in before sunset. I slept through the first rain after that and woke up because Maya was crying in the nursery chair. Not from panic this time, just relief. 3 days after the permanent shingle install started, a certified envelope arrived from Brent's bond carrier. Liability accepted up to the bond limit. Investigation ongoing. Payment process initiated upon final documentation of mitigation and repair costs. I stood in the kitchen reading it while Brent's last voicemail sat unheard in my inbox. For the first time since he peeled that roof open, I knew the ending before he did. The bond check did not arrive overnight because nothing with forms and signatures ever does, but it came. First, the surety money, enough to cover the emergency wrap, interior drying, insulation replacement, ceiling demo, and most of the second contractor's cost to correct what Brent had opened and failed to protect. Then, months later, the recovery fund closed the rest of the gap between his abandonment and the bond limit. Between the two, we got back almost everything that mattered financially. What we did not get back was the month of stress where every weather alert felt personal. The board case kept moving after the money did. Brent's license was suspended pending further action, and once the complaint became visible enough, other people started surfacing. The neighbor who had originally recommended him knocked on my door one evening and told me 3 other homeowners had filed after hearing what happened to us. One unfinished addition, one botched bathroom gut, one deck job where he took the deposit and stopped answering. It was the same routine every time. Friendly at the start, gone once the money cleared. The house, meanwhile, started looking like ours again. The new roof passed inspection. The nursery ceiling got patched, primed, and repainted a warm off-white Maya picked after rejecting 6 samples on principle. The warped baseboards in the hallway were replaced. The crib finally got assembled under a dry ceiling instead of leaning in a box beside paint cans. The last bucket disappeared from the floor. One night, maybe 5 months after the leak, I walked past the nursery and saw Maya inside with one hand on the crib rail, just standing there in the quiet. No panic, no stockpot catching water, no towels lined along the wall. She looked at me and said, "It finally feels safe in here." That hit me harder than the check did. I spent a while blaming Brent, which he absolutely earned, but I also had to admit the part that was mine. I had known the rules. I had seen enough jobs go sideways to recognize every red flag in the room. I ignored them because urgency makes bad judgment feel like decisiveness. Brent counted on that. He counted on me being too embarrassed to turn the whole mess into a file. The moment I stopped trying to be reasonable with him was the moment the house became mine again. If this one hit a nerve, subscribe and leave a like. There are more stories where this came from.